What happens when mercy collides with justice? In today's gripping story, Linda faces the ultimate test. Her ex-husband, the man who kidnapped her in the forest and caused her to lose her unborn child, pleads for forgiveness and asks for leniency in court. Torn between her compassionate heart and the harsh reality of his crimes, Linda must decide whether to grant mercy while ensuring justice prevails. Beside her, Quang remains a steadfast protector, knowing the darkness she endured could strike again. Stay with us as we unfold this emotional courtroom drama, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories of courage, love, and justice. The courtroom was suffused with a tense, almost suffocating atmosphere, as if the very walls held their breath, waiting for the verdict that could change lives forever. Linda sat rigidly in her seat, her fingers entwined nervously, while Quang stood beside her, a silent pillar of strength, his eyes never leaving the man who had once called himself her husband. That man, her former husband, was led in, shackled at the wrists, his face pale, lined with stress, and perhaps genuine remorse, though there was something calculating lingering in his gaze that made Quang's jaw tighten. The courtroom murmured quietly as everyone awaited the opening statements, but all Linda could hear was the steady pounding of her own heart. Memories she had tried so hard to bury came rushing back in vivid flashes. The terror of being dragged into the dense, unyielding forest, the endless nights trapped under his watchful, menacing eyes, and the agonizing loss of the child she had carried, a silent victim of his cruelty. Every detail haunted her. The way the branches scratched at her skin, the bitter taste of fear and despair, the lonely darkness that enveloped her as she realized her world had been stolen from her in those horrifying hours. And now, standing before her, he appeared fragile, almost pitiable, his voice trembling as he spoke, pleading with both Linda and Quang to consider sparing him, to file a statement seeking leniency on his behalf. "I was wrong," he whispered, his words punctuated by choked sobs. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I am truly sorry. Please, I beg of you, help me. Ask the court to understand, to show mercy." The courtroom shrank as his voice filled a space, every word designed to pull at the strings of sympathy, and for a fleeting moment, Linda's chest constricted with a confusing mix of anger, sorrow, and the faintest trace of pity. She remembered the man she had once believed in, the promises he had made, and the love she had thought eternal, now shattered into fragments too sharp to touch without bleeding. She saw his knees trembling as he knelt slightly, a desperate display meant to convince the world and perhaps herself that he was penitent. The judge's eyes flicked over the documents, indifferent to the drama, yet the weight of moral and emotional tension in the room seemed palpable, pressing down like a physical force on everyone present. Quang's hand tightened around hers, a silent warning, a reminder that compassion must be balanced with caution. He knew the man sitting there was capable of more than words could convey, that behind those tearful eyes lurked the same darkness that had brought her to the brink of despair, that had snatched away her unborn child and left scars no apology could erase. Yet, Linda, in her heart, felt the familiar stirrings of mercy, the instinctive desire to forgive, to see the human beneath the horrors, to grant some measure of grace even to the one who had caused her the deepest pain. It was a tumultuous, dangerous mix of emotions, and she felt the tension between her own yearning to forgive and the stark reality of the man's past crimes. A battle waged quietly within her, as the courtroom continued to watch, waiting to see whether justice or compassion would prevail, or if, perhaps, in the delicate balance of the human heart, both could coexist in an uneasy truce. Linda sat in the courtroom, her back stiff, her hands still entwined with Quang's, though her mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. The air seemed heavier now, thick with the weight of the past and the haunting echo of what she had endured. She could still feel the phantom touch of fear, the coldness of the nights she had spent trapped in the forest, the loneliness that had pierced her soul more sharply than any blade. Yet, in the midst of this pain, a strange and unbidden tenderness stirred within her, a deep, instinctive urge to forgive, to look beyond the horrors and see the fragile human being who knelt before her. It was as if part of her wanted to reach out, to offer a lifeline to someone drowning in his own guilt, to grant the solace of mercy, if only to ease her own restless heart. She imagined the possibility of release for him, a chance at redemption that might somehow restore balance, though she knew it could never undo the suffering, never bring back the child she had lost. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, to tell him that forgiveness was possible, that she could find it in herself to grant him at least that small measure of grace. But before word could leave her, Quang's hand tightened around hers, grounding her, reminding her of the reality that lay beneath the surface of her emotions. Quang's eyes were sharp, unwavering, and full of a protective intensity that made her pulse quicken. He had seen the man's true nature, had witnessed the cruelty that had once left Linda broken and vulnerable, had observed the calculating gaze that lurked behind every word of apology, behind every tear that glistened on his cheeks. He whispered softly, almost inaudibly, "Linda, remember who he is. Don't let your heart betray your wisdom." And in that moment, Linda felt the tension between her compassion and her instinct for self-preservation, a tug of war between the desire to see humanity in him and the fear of opening the door to further pain. Memories clashed violently with emotions. She recalled his threats, the way he had manipulated her, the helplessness that had consumed her while she had suffered in silence. And yet, she also remembered the woman she had always wanted to be, someone who could rise above bitterness, who could recognize remorse even in those who had caused the deepest wounds. The courtroom seemed to blur around her as she wrestled with these thoughts. She could see the jury's eyes on her, the judge's pen poised over the papers, the hushed whispers of spectators waiting for her reaction. She felt the weight of responsibility settle like a stone in her chest. She was being asked not merely to forgive, but to intervene, to influence the scales of justice with her own heart. And while a part of her yearned for mercy, another part, sharper, wiser, fortified by Quang's unwavering presence, reminded her that true forgiveness did not mean surrendering to naivete. It did not mean granting freedom to cruelty, nor did it erase the suffering endured. Quang's steady presence was a tether, pulling her from the precipice of dangerous compassion, reminding her that love for oneself and for justice must coexist. Finally, Linda drew a slow, steadying breath, feeling the tremor in her chest ease slightly. She knew in that instant that she could hold space for forgiveness in her heart without allowing it to cloud her judgment, that she could release the need for vengeance while still insisting on accountability. She glanced at Quang, their eyes locking in a silent understanding. Mercy would not be blind, love would not be reckless, and together they would navigate this treacherous intersection of past pain and moral duty. The storm of emotions within her settled into a determined calm, a recognition that forgiveness was her choice, but it was a choice bounded by wisdom, strength, and the unbreakable resolve to protect herself from further harm. In that courtroom, as the man knelt and begged for leniency, Linda realized that mercy was not a weakness, nor was it an obligation, but a deliberate act of courage, one that demanded clarity, vigilance, and the courage to look beyond the surface of remorse to the truths hidden beneath. The courtroom held its breath as Linda slowly rose to her feet, her movements deliberate, each step echoing with the weight of her decision. All around her, eyes were fixed, but she only saw the man before her, the one who had caused her the deepest suffering, the man who had stolen her peace and torn away the child she would never hold. Yet in her gaze there was no rage, no bitterness that consumed her. Instead, there was clarity, tempered by pain and hard-won strength. She took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling Quang's steady hand brush against hers, an anchor in the swirling storm of emotion. She could feel the tension of the entire room pressing down. Yet in that instant, she understood the delicate balance between mercy and justice. She had wrestled with her heart and soul, faced the seductive pull of compassion for a man who had begged for forgiveness, but she knew the truth. Forgiveness did not mean condoning, and mercy did not equate to weakness. Looking squarely at him, she spoke, her voice calm but firm, carrying a weight that made even the courtroom walls seem to lean in closer. "I can forgive you in my heart," she said, her words deliberate, each syllable measured, like a strike of judgment tempered by grace. "I can release the anger and the pain you caused me, but that does not erase the consequences of your actions. You will answer for what you have done. Justice cannot be replaced by sympathy." The man's head dropped, and for a moment, a flicker of genuine understanding or perhaps desperation crossed his features. Quang's gaze never wavered, sharp and protective, ensuring that Linda's act of mercy would not be misconstrued as weakness, that her forgiveness would not open a door to further harm. He knew that the man's charm, his tears, his feigned remorse could never mask the darkness that had once held Linda captive, the cruelty that had caused her to lose a part of herself forever. Linda continued, her voice steady now, reinforced by the clarity of her own convictions. "I will not let your past sins dictate my future. I will carry forgiveness in my heart, but I will also carry the memory of what you have done, and I will not allow you to repeat it, either to me or anyone else. Your plea for mercy does not replace the law, nor does it erase the pain you caused." Every word was a careful strike, cutting through the pretense of regret that the man had so carefully constructed, leaving only the raw truth in its wake. Around them, the courtroom felt the shift, the fragile tension replaced by a solemn recognition that justice and compassion could coexist, but only when tempered with wisdom and vigilance. As the judge nodded, signaling that the man's fate would now be determined by the law and not by misplaced sentiment, Linda felt a quiet relief settle over her. The storm of emotions that had threatened to overwhelm her began to ebb, leaving behind a profound sense of empowerment. She realized that forgiving did not mean forgetting, and that mercy could be offered without compromising justice. Quang leaned closer, his voice barely audible but full of warmth and pride. "You are stronger than you know, Linda, and together we make sure that strength protects us, protects the truth." In that moment, she understood their bond, built on love, trust, and mutual respect, was the truest shield against the darkness that had once sought to destroy her. The man sat down shackled, the weight of accountability pressing down upon him. He had sought mercy, but what he received was a lesson far more enduring, that true forgiveness could exist alongside justice, that compassion did not erase consequences, and that those who betrayed trust would face the inevitable reckoning of their choices. Linda exhaled slowly, a mixture of sorrow and relief flowing through her, as she and Quang walked from the courtroom together, their hands entwined, hearts aligned, ready to face a future where the past had been acknowledged, the wounds honored, and the path forward guided by both love an unwavering truth.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tử Linda Review. Vậy là trong tập phim ngày hôm nay, chồng cũ của Linda đã bị pháp luật xử lý theo quy định của pháp luật. Liệu rằng nhưng mà hắn đã cầu xin Linda và Quang là hãy cho hắn một cơ hội để làm lại. Linda thì có tính thương người, cô muốn tha thứ cho hắn, làm đơn để xin giảm tội cho hắn. Còn Quang thì rất là nghi ngờ vì đây không phải lần đầu hắn có những hành vi tội lỗi như thế. Liệu rằng lần này nếu mà Quang và Linda tha thứ cho hắn thì hắn còn gây ra những tội lỗi nào nữa hay không? Tất cả sẽ được hé lộ vào các tập tiếp theo. Các bạn nhớ bấm vào nút đăng ký kênh, có hình quả chuông ở bên dưới video để nhận được thông báo mới nhất về các tập phim sẽ được phát sóng vào lúc 8 giờ sáng hàng ngày giờ Việt Nam trên kênh Lý Tử Linda Review. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại. Goodbye.